Good morning, San Francisco.
Good morning, San Francisco. We are here with Bloom, and we are about to go over the relationship attachment styles, and we are going to dive in, folks. So get ready to get vulnerable and get real with yourself.
Oh my gosh, can we really use that? That was amazing.
Oh, hello.
Hi, Lauren, and hi, everybody listening.
We are here. We're going to dive into something a little more touchy. We're going to call it touchy. Vulnerable, relationship, feelings, emotional. And we are going to go over relationship attachment styles.
Yes.
So, Kendra, I'll let you lead in a little bit, and I'll explain them to everybody.
Yeah, so just like the love languages are really helpful and important to know about, what your love language is, what your partner's love language is. This is a similar thing with the attachment styles, because depending on what your attachment style is, you will respond accordingly, depending, like whenever you're in stress or there's turmoil in your relationship, or even if you're just stressed in your own life. So you can already understand how knowing how you respond to stress in your relationship or how your partner does can be helpful, because you can see it happening and be like, oh. So it's just bringing a level of self-awareness into your relationships. And there's a ton of information on this out there. I'm sure there's whole books you can read. We're just going to kind of briefly introduce you to the different attachment styles. And then you can most likely when you hear the 4 different ones, there will be one where you're like, that's probably me, or that's definitely me. But you can read more about it. But we highly encourage you to dig into this a little bit and figure out what your attachment style is and what your partner's attachment style is, and share that together. So, Lauren, why don't you tell everybody what the 4 different attachment styles are?
We're going to start with the secure attachment style. So this implies basically the person is obviously comfortable with where they're at, expressing their emotions openly. This also can be based on just like the honesty within the relationship, the tolerance they have for situations, and how do they handle fights? How do you handle them going out with friends? Anything like that. Emotional closeness. They also just thrive in their relationships. They also don't have fear being on their own or anything like that. They don't depend on the approval of their partners. They tend to have a positive view of themselves and others.
This is like the secure attachment
The
is like,
goal of all.
right? It's like the goal. It's where you want to get to. And it's a possibility for everybody to develop a secure attachment style.
Next, we're going to go to the disorganized type. So they tend to be a little more unstable in their behaviors with their social bonds. They could be like, I want a relationship, but I don't. But I do, but I don't. But I also am here and I'm there. And so it's a lot
Very
to handle.
disorganized.
I'm just going to be very honest. It's probably yep. A little here, a little there. Okay. They don't regulate their emotions well. They avoid strong emotional attachment
Mm.
due to fear of just getting hurt. So that was disorganized. We're going to move on to dismissing or avoidant. So they perceive themselves as lone wolves. They're strong. They're independent. Um, they they're ones that usually will just like pull themselves back in some sort of situation. Like they don't really need anybody. Like I'm good. I'm fine. Moving on. All is fine. But deep down, they do need that emotional attachment. But they really don't know how to show it. And
I think it almost, when you listening to it, almost is like they're afraid to be vulnerable, and they don't, so they go inward, and they're like, all I need is myself. I don't need to worry about someone else. I don't need to like worry about anyone else. All I need to worry about is myself, which to an extent is true and healthy. But obviously the unhealthy version of that is, the secure attachment is both. Like, I'm happy with myself and I'm in charge of myself, but I also can thrive in a relationship. Where the avoidant is like, I'm going to check out as soon as things get scary and hard. I'm just going to go retreat inward, which doesn't facilitate deep connection. Definitely.
yeah, and they just suppress their feelings, and they're like faced with any emotional situations, anything that can be very vulnerable, like Kendra was saying, or where they need to express themselves of any sort. So that is going to be dismissing or avoidant. Okay. Now our last one is anxious. This is the thought of living without a partner causes high levels of anxiety. People of this type typically have a negative self-image while having a positive view of
Mm.
others. So this really leans into, if we think about like social media, it's like, how many likes do I have? How many followers do I have? What is this? What is that? It's like you're needing so much outward approval just to make sure you're worthy for a relationship, or worthy of this, or worthy of getting anything of those sorts.
Mm.
Strong fear about abandonment and safety is a big priority for them, though, at the same time. So this is something that they really need to feel comfortable with. And one other main part I would say is they are often worried about their loved one is not invested in the relationship as much as they are.
Oh.
So it's just constant fear of like, do they love me as much as I do? Am I doing too much? Are they not doing enough? Or are they doing too much? I'm not doing enough. So it's just a constant back and forth. So that is going to be more of an anxious relationship style.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Lauren, what do you think your attachment style is? When you read those, like what signs point to this is me?
I would have to say I'm very grateful. Like now I'm very secure with Tony. We've been married for 5 years though. It'll be 6 years in 6 months. So that's nuts.
Mm.
But before that, I could definitely say after reading these more out loud, I was a little bit of anxious mixed with probably avoidant just because I was very scared of like, is somebody going to take care of me? Am I going to have to take care of them? What's going to happen? Like, do they love me or do they love somebody else or what's happening? And I think a lot of it had to deal with bodybuilding and social media
Mm.
and everything else around it. Is just like all the other approvals happening and everything else and all the extra people trying to come in and come out. And me and Tony always talked about that of we built a relationship together in the bodybuilding industry, which honestly, thank God, because I don't know if we would have, it's very tough on couples when they don't build their names together. And it's very hard, like internally on relationships, that a lot of people don't see that or hear about that, but it's very
Mm.
true. So I would say I was a little anxious and like dismissing or avoidant, but now I'm very secure. I can say that. Like Tony's can go on work trips, and I'm like, yep, you're good.
Go ahead.
Go for it. No issues, anything like that. So it's kind of nice. It's actually really nice, and it's very secure.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what about you, Kendra?
Well, what's interesting is I used to think that I think I am also more on the secure side now. Um, I used to think that I was always secure because I was like, I don't need, like, it's not up to you to make me happy. It's not up to me to make you happy, which is true. But I took it a little too far to where I was like super independent, which is a big thing for avoidant attachment styles. It's like hyper independent. But there was a fear in it. So I think all of these attachment styles are outside of the secure are led by fear. And that's how you can know, like, do I want to chase them for this conversation because I love them and I feel like it's the right thing, or because I'm afraid they're going to leave me? Or do I want to step away from this right now and take some time alone because I love them and I don't want to say something I'm going to regret? Or is it because I'm afraid to let them in? I'm afraid that I will get too attached to them and they'll hurt me. So that's something to note. And also something else to note is these all develop based on trauma when we're raised or in a past relationship. But everybody has the capacity to have a secure relationship. It just takes work. And depending on where you're at and what you've been through, maybe some people have to work harder than others and a little bit more than others, but it's available to everyone to feel secure in their relationships. I started really diving into this with my husband, who's actually here. We're going to bring him on for a little Q&A because we learned a lot about this together and it was so helpful to us. That's why I was like, Lauren, we should talk about this. We should at least introduce it. We're not psychologists. We don't have all the book smarts on this, but Doug and I have we dove into this quite a bit and understood each other a lot better. Like immediately, it was like, oh, you make so much more sense to me now. He said that to me several times as he really dove into this. He's like, you make so much more sense to me, and it's not as scary when you retreat because I understand you. So he's here. So we're gonna take a quick break. We're gonna bring him on. Lauren's gonna ask us some questions. So give us just a second. What's up, dude? Welcome to our podcast, honey. So this is Doug, everybody.
Hello.
He's my husband and he's awesome. He's a very self-aware person and we went through it recently and it instead of him just being mad at me and the world, he turned to resources like the one like this that we're introducing you to, possibly introducing you to, and it's been very helpful for us. So thanks for being
My pleasure.
so great.
All right. Well, here in the Bloom Room, I have some questions for you. Are you ready?
So ready.
I had to say it.
I love it.
All right. So, first things first, how did you both figure out your relationship attachment style? So, like, did you take a test? Did you read books? Like, how did you figure out what your style was?
Doug figured it out for both of us. So you tell him.
They're pretty obvious.
Yeah.
They really are. That's like, I think one of the benefits is like your actions speak louder than words, and the stuff that people start doing in relationships when it comes to a moment of stress or contention, or just when things feel off, or even when they're status quo, like the way that we act is really revealing. And so, like for me, I'm an anxious attacher, and it's like there's no question about that. It's like 100%. Everything that I do ticks every single one of the boxes, and everything that Kendra did, like she was an avoidant, and that's a really tough one, the anxious avoidant one. So there was a lot of stuff we had to learn and work on.
What's the one thing that stuck out the most to both of you to make your relationship work?
Well, so what's interesting is that I think that our opposite attachment styles attracted us to each other. I'll say for me for sure, because I would retreat and be like, I don't have needs, and which could be anxious as well. People in the anxious attachment style could feel that way, like you're the only one that matters in this relationship. But I was like, I'm just gonna be okay with myself and whatever. But he was like, no, like he would draw it out of me because he was like, no, let's talk, which really was attractive because I was like, wow, he wants to hear what I have to say. It drew it out of me. But when we got deeper into our relationship after we've been married for a couple of years and we would fight, I didn't want to talk sometimes, and he sometimes wouldn't let me not talk. And we hadn't figured this out yet. So it drove both of us crazy because I'd retreat and he'd chase. And so it was just this cat and mouse cycle.
Like I would like literally follow her from like room to room.
Oh my gosh, it drove me crazy. I would lock myself in the bathroom. I would.
No, that makes it sound so bad.
It's not we're not Johnny Depp, Amber Heard style.
That makes it sound so bad.
It's just because I didn't have.
You would not lock yourself in the bathroom.
No, I wouldn't. But I would go to the bathroom. Nobody asked. This is actually a great tip for moms. If you need a second, no one's going to ask or wonder what you're doing in the bathroom. So that's where I'd go if I just needed a minute. But I didn't feel confident enough to say I needed a minute. But that was on me, not you.
Okay, I would like to take like 3 giant steps back and talk about some of that, like the following from room to room. So I think when you're doing good and when your relationship is healthy, there's a lot of really positive things that can come from your attachment style, even if you don't fit into that like secure ideal. Like for instance, I think an anxious attacher is usually pretty attuned to the needs of the other person, because they're constantly wanting to impress or receive validation of the status of their relationship or their own worth in their partner's eyes. And so it may not be done for the best reason. I don't think that's the best motivation to do the stuff that you do in a relationship. But I think that an anxious attacher can be especially attuned to the needs of the other person. I think an avoidant attacher, like the silver lining there or the bonus there is that they can be very strong, and they tend to be very like emotionally stable, or at least more so than an anxious one is. So there are benefits, right? There are definitely benefits. And I think when stuff starts to get off, it just becomes this like, we just kind of like ramped each other up, right? It wasn't like I would like literally like follow her from room to room and she wouldn't literally lock herself in the bathroom, right?
That only happened like twice.
Right? Oh my gosh.
But it wasn't just him I was hiding from. I was hiding from my problems.
Oh my gosh.
No, but that's a good point, I think. And Lauren, I think you could probably speak to this too in your own relationship, that there's whatever we naturally, relate to. So once we've made it to the secure attachment style, we can still notice when we're like in moments where we're maybe like stepping back into the avoidant or stepping back into the anxious. So
And that takes a lot of just being open and communicating of like, okay, if you're upset, like, how should we handle it? How do you want to talk about this? Like, what do you not want me to do? Or you can nicely be like, please do not talk to me like that in this situation because I just take it like this, or this is how I feel it. And it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of patience, and a lot of, if you do need to run away to the bathroom for a moment, that's totally okay. I want to do that as well. I'm like, I just need like 2 seconds. 2 seconds. Let me just calm down, and then we can talk about this. Because also, I don't know about you, Kendra, but I can be very reactive. So I do need the moment where I'm like, I could just yell. My mom said, if you have nothing nice to say, you don't say anything at all. I will say that to Tony. I'll be like, I have nothing nice to say, so I'm going to walk away. And that's like, but then he knows, like, okay, she needs a moment. So it's like, those are things I'm sure you two have learned where it's like, this is a cue. If we are in a rough spot, I'm going to say this, and you know exactly what's going on. And those are things you can learn too as you have this with your significant other, whoever it is, friendship, anything like that. Is learning those cues from the other person and knowing when to pull back for a second. If you are being too much, if you're not being enough, or whatever it is, and it's paying attention to that to be like, okay, I hear you, I see you, I feel you, I will give you a moment, or hey, I'll give you a hug, or hey, this, or hey, whatever it is, you have to be able to catch on to those cues while being vulnerable to talk about your attachment styles. That's it can be very tough sometimes. Like, I'm an anxious attachment. When you guys figured out your styles, was there anything where you're like, oh my God, is that really me? Do I do that? Oh my God, I do that. Like, was there a weird realization of like, that is definitely how I function, and I don't know how I feel about it? Was there any moment of like, oh,
Yeah, we would read articles about the attachment styles and like look around the house like there was like hidden cameras and someone was like watching us and then writing
about us.
articles because it was like so bang on, like everything that we did. It was like exact phrases, exact phrases and stuff.
But it was so it did take some work, but also understanding that about ourselves and each other was like an immediate shift because we understood it wasn't that I didn't care about Doug as much as he cared about me. It was that I was retreating because that's what I did when I felt insecure. So he was like, oh, and I was like, it's not that he doesn't respect my boundaries. It's that he feels unsafe and unwanted. And so he's reaching and trying to get that validation. So yeah, it was an immediate help.
Yeah, for sure. Just to acknowledge it and to give voice to it, for sure. One thing I was gonna say is that like once I feel like we kind of got a good feel for what our attachment styles were and realized that our particular attachment styles led to this anxious avoidant kind of like rabbit chase, where we're constantly like chasing after each other or running away from each other in this particular dynamic, the anxious avoidant one, rather than like immediately dive in to start working on our styles together. The immediate work I think was like self work, like what you were just talking about with Tony, and how you guys have the ability to strongly like know what you need or what you want and to voice that to one another. Like being able to be okay individually with that, like if Kendra says, hey, I need a little space, being able to be like, oh, that's not about me. I'm still good to go. This is just what she needs. It's so much easier than if I'm thinking, everything that she does is about me or is a reflection of her feelings towards me and if they were, that could damage me or hurt me, like thinking those things instead of thinking like, what, even if she did feel that way, I'd still be okay. Like I'd still be all right. I could still have security and self-esteem and emotional strength, and that's important.
It's very true, and you have to not take things personal. It's very, very hard. It's very hard not when somebody says something, be like, that was directly towards me. My whole entire world is hurt, and I'm going to crumble. It's like you could easily do that in any situation, any conversation. It does not matter what it is, and it's being able to honestly disconnect the emotion for a moment and actually hear somebody and be like, what did they say?
Yeah.
Was that directly towards me? Was that directly towards the situation? And it's being able to slow down, disconnect the emotion for a minute, and actually listen. And you have to be a really good listener and hear between the lines of like, maybe she doesn't say she needs space, but you can be like, hey, Kendra, maybe we should just separate for like 5-10 minutes, gather your thoughts, I'll gather mine, and let's come back and chat.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of strength right there too to catch on. So My next question for you guys is like, what makes you feel secure in your relationship? Like, what have you guys learned? I want to hear like from each of you, like 2 or 3 things that you've either done for yourself or you've done for each other that has made you feel more secure in your relationship.
Specifically around this stuff, like our attachment style.
Mhm.
I was actually thinking about the request because that's a very proactive way to relationship, right? To be able to read cues from your partner. I think that is definitely a something that exists in a healthy, very healthy, stable relationship, which you get to through constant and honest communication. That constant and honest communication is hard for me because I do just retreat. And so I tested the waters a little, and when I saw him honor that, it was easier for me the next time, you know. So it was so not easy the first time because there was a part of me that felt like, you know, I'm this is rude or
Rude.
I don't know. It was a lot of different thoughts. So I think just practicing, I guess I'll call it practicing.
Honestly, and I think like you just saying that is like it's okay to still lean into your attachment style if you know how to use it for the
Mm.
good to be in a secure relationship. Because like if it's okay if you need a moment, that's not bad at all. That means you have a lot of confidence within yourself in your relationship. And it's like if you need to sit for a second, that's okay. So it's like not taking all these attachment styles to seem as negative. It's like some of those things in there make you who you are, but it's like how are you using them or talking about them or showing excuse me, or showing them to somebody.
Right. One thing that I also wanted to share was I'd meet him where he was at too. And we learned this from something we read. I wouldn't just be like, I need some time and then just walk away because then he's going to be like, I don't need time. So I'm just sitting here waiting. So it's more like, I need time. Give me 30 minutes or give me a couple of days to just let this simmer. Like giving somebody who doesn't necessarily need time and is allowing you the time, giving them a deadline so that they can kind of just relax and let you do you. The another thing that I think is I really want to mention is that I have actually really learned to love, not even learn to, I remind myself how much I love and appreciate Doug's willingness to dig in and to like bring it out of me and remind myself this is something that made me fall in love with him in the first place
Come on.
and not just be irritated because sometimes it is irritating when I'm like, I don't want to talk about this and I don't know how far to push because I'm like, am I being avoidant right now or do I need a minute? Like that it can sometimes be convoluted in those moments and I'll get annoyed and be like, I don't want to talk about it, you know, why does he keep asking me all these questions? And I just feel but taking a moment to remind myself, okay, but this is something that I actually really admire and love about him and I need in a partner to some extent, which is why we tend to be attracted to our opposites. Because I need somebody who will draw it out of me sometimes because my natural inclination is to go inward. So while it can be an opposite and it can be triggering and frustrating, remind yourself how it is also a gift and also why your partner's is a gift to you. So those are 3 things that I've implemented that have been helpful to me. What about you, babe?
Well, I like I like y'all's positive spin. We've talked. I think all three of us have mentioned that our attachment styles can have a silver lining or a benefit or pros to them,
Mm-hmm.
and that's always good to remember instead of looking at it as like this is my curse or whatever. One thing that I think was super important for me was really intense like self ownership. Um, I think sometimes like nowadays when people talk about like self care, they talk it. I think you guys have talked about this on the podcast before about how self care sometimes is used to kind of be like indulgent.
Mm.
Whereas like self-care, I think initially it was supposed to be about this like empowerment and bettering yourself. And then you go into your life and into your relationships again and you spread that goodness because your batteries are recharged and you're presenting your best self, right? So I think that the same thing, like in relationships, sometimes we get really selfish and we only think about what we want or what we need out of a relationship. And learning about the anxious attachment style really helped me kind of see, like it kind of like laid my patterns out in front of me, and I had to be like, oh man, like I think I was demanding things of Kendra that were beyond our relationship. It was just about me and things that I needed from her or just wanted from her. She needed to fulfill something for me instead of me wanting to attach with her or interact with her in a way that was healthy and built our relationship. And so recognizing and realizing and seeing those things that I was doing, um, I think it'd be very apparent that I was not honoring like her timetable, or that I was demanding she would talk about topics that maybe she needed some time to process, where I tend to wear my heart on my sleeve, and like I have no like filter. Whatever my emotions are is what's coming out.
Which is
And
something I love about him until until I don't.
until
But most
until
of the
she
time,
runs away and locks herself in the bathroom every day.
say every day.
So
But this leans into knowing your partner's love language too. It's like, because people tend to love how they want to be loved. Doug, you just pushing that on her is like, this is how I like to be loved, so I'm just going to love her the same way. When really, maybe Kendra needs a different love.
Mhm.
And so catching on to that and realizing, how does that person need love? Like, what is quality time to them? When that person's down, what should I be doing? And that's where you have to be very careful of just trying to love somebody how you like to be
yeah.
loved, because it's not the same thing.
And it's crazy how the love languages can shift and change over time. And so we were pretty sure, like at the beginning of our relationship, and I think we were right. Like words of affirmation were very important to me, and they were like middling for Ken, and like physical touch was very important to her, and it was like in the middle for me. And when as part of like our work on our couple and on our marriage and stuff, and we're talking about attachment styles, we actually did the love language test again not too long ago,
Yeah.
a couple months ago now probably. And words of affirmation, I've never seen anybody score a 0 in something, but she scored a 0 in it, and it made sense because like
I actually really like words. Don't be afraid to give me words.
no, but like it makes sense because as an anxious attacher, I'm constantly like blah 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 blah, and so like I think words to her are just like like why, whereas like doing acts of service, because she's been super super busy, and kicking butt and doing everything she does. Yeah, I think acts of service that bumped up to her number one thing. And for me, this is crazy. My whole life, I've kind of been like in relationships I've been in or whatever. I've been like not like into PDA, and I haven't really like been super like touchy feely. And was it my number one?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was my number one the last time I took the test, and I was like, "Say what?" Right? But it's because of this idea of like in the moment, because this anxious avoidant thing was happening, and I just wanted her like to her presence. I wanted her to reach out and touch me, and so because I was constantly chasing her, my entire love language kind of table shifted. So that's a really interesting one. You got to stay on top of that. Yeah.
And I will say the avoidant, and probably all of them, it's not just in conversation, like just a quick, we won't dive too deep into it right now, but I mean, it was apparent in all areas.
Oh yeah.
Like I wasn't I wasn't as interested in being physically intimate because I was avoiding, it's not just when you're communicating, it is like all arenas. So something to keep in mind when you're thinking about your own or your partner's.
Okay, biggest advice you'd give to other couples? Like, would you recommend reading into attachment styles right away, or would you go love language to attachment, or how would you use these as a tool in a relationship? And just give us your advice.
Can I go?
Yeah.
Because this is something you guys have to think. This is not very common for a lot of people to look into. Like, this is very new even for me. I heard about it back in March at Atlas Day. That was my first time. I'm 28 years old. That's my first time. I've been married for almost 6 years.
Yeah.
Okay? So this is very new for people. So you have to think, like, what is something that you would just give advice to other couples looking at the attachment styles? Like, how to listen, love.
Well, as a fellow 28-year-old.
Okay.
No, I think it's just really important to recognize and realize that like you're a product of your life and how you saw your parents love, and if you've been in other relationships or other marriages, um,
Which Doug has.
Yeah, which I have.
Many.
Just
kidding. Just one.
No.
He's a
No.
fanatic marriage.
No, look, you're a product. The way that you love is a product of how you've lived, and like no one does it perfectly. And I always think like we'll read tons of self-help books, or we'll read tons of books about like our career or about our profession or about all that stuff. And we'll dabble into parenting and things like that. But like, how often do we think that we need to practice at or learn about how to love better? So I think really the first step is, I mean, it sounds like super basic, but in like a marriage or relationship, is to just realize like, hey, like I can do this better. Like there's a lot of literature out there. There's a lot of things out there that I didn't even know about, even though we're both 28 years old. I didn't even know about attachment styles, right? So there's a lot of stuff out there that I think you just need to open your mind and be like, look, I can be a better version of me in this relationship.
Proactivity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And a lot of that starts with, like you even mentioned it earlier, Doug, is like taking care of yourself first. Like you have to be at your best to even give the right love and give enough love and be the best you can for your relationship. So it's like start with yourself, because that's the only way. It sounds selfish, but it's actually not.
Yeah, not if it's done in service towards, your partner or towards your relationship. And you asked about which one I would start with. I actually think maybe the attachment style thing was more important and more revealing. It helped me understand you better and helped me feel more secure with you than understanding love languages do. I think that the attachment style for me helped me come to a place of um, really, I think, like seeing Kendra a little bit better and understanding some of the things that she did. And then love languages is like advanced on top of that. Like, okay, now what do I do to make sure that I'm actually serving her in a way that she appreciates, now that we've established some sort of like equilibrium, or we've come to some sort of understanding, how can I better serve her and love her from the day to day? That's where I think love languages came in for me. I don't know.
Yeah. Also, I feel like love languages can be really confusing because like everybody likes all of them,
Yeah.
Yes.
and we also I do
Except for
think
words of affirmation. She hates it.
no, I don't. I do think we shift. I actually had a friend. Her theory was whatever one we feel deprived of the most is what we have as our number one. We tend to, and the one that we get enough of ends up lower on the scale, which checks out for what Doug brought up earlier. But I just think it's really it's really clear the attachment styles is a lot more insightful than the love languages, but both are important. I just think that one might be more clear.
I agree. And I think the attachment styles just give you an outline of explaining their love languages. Because, like, love languages are very vague. It's just like, I love acts of service. Okay, but why? Like, what's the deeper issue? So I agree. I think attachment styles into love languages makes the most sense. Which love languages, y'all, we can touch on later and we can do a whole episode on, because I think they're very important even outside of a relationship, like a significant other. They actually teach you a lot about your friends, who you work with, everything like that. But Kendra, what advice do you have?
Well, I mean, I talk about this all the time, but remembering that your spouse is your mirror, and also, so not to blame them for feelings that you have, because nobody is in charge of how you feel. So if Doug makes me upset, the best thing I can do for our relationship is ask myself, what did he say that triggered something in me that is still needing healing, or something in me that is hurting, or something in me that, you know what I mean? And it's so much easier to hold space for each other when you get out of the habit of blaming each other for how the response that you're having to the issue. And also to tag onto that, once you can say, this feeling's about me. What is he actually saying right now? Because what I'm hearing has a lot to do with what I'm feeling, which has a lot to do with places where I still need healing. So just remember that your spouse and your friends and your job and your money, like it's all a mirror. Anything that creates an emotional response within you is a gift. It's pointing to somewhere inside of yourself that you need to heal and not blame.
I love it. Yes, I love it. So we all really encourage you all to figure out, like, what is your attachment style. We can link actually just a little quiz you can take below to figure out what yours is. You can share it with your partner, anything like that, or even share this podcast with your partner just to give them a little insight of what it is, how does it work, how you can use it, and how it can actually be a tool. And it's nothing bad. It really isn't. Like, you can see where you're at, what you need to work on, how and why you respond in a certain way you do. But really, dive in, be more self-aware, and take charge of your own life and your own relationships, and you'll feel the benefit of it. It will take some work, but it is so worth it.
Mm.
So please make sure to share this. If you guys have any questions, always reach out to our Instagram. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube. Hit the little bell at the top for the notifications. Yep. Do
Where
it.
everybody?
And y'all are great. Truly. We appreciate you. And this is the Bloom Room and our first interview. And I got to interview y'all, and I appreciate it.
Thanks for
So
having me.
everyone have a good night, and we'll,
Yes.
of course, and we'll see you next time.